Hey y'all, welcome to my YouTube channel where we learn together, take action together, and reflect together. My name is Tamira and thank you so much for being here. Today's car conversation is about the brilliant human beings whose work guides and influences my beliefs and values about education and liberation. So let's jump right into it with the inspiration behind the title of this video. No introduction needed. I am just going to share the clip.
To the OGs, I'm thanking you now. Was watching you when you was paving the ground. I copied your cadence, I mirrored your style. I studied the grace, I'm the greatest right now.
To know me is to know that J. Cole is my favorite rapper alongside Lil Wayne. The clip I played is from J. Cole's song, Middle Child, and when he said, to the OGs, I'm thanking you now, was watching you when you was paving the ground, I copied your cadence, I mirrored your style, I studied the grace, I'm the greatest right now. Listen, I felt it so much that I immediately visualized the people who have paved the ground for me, whose cadence I copied, whose style I mirrored. And let's be clear, y'all, I am not claiming to be the greatest right now, as Cole says in the song. I can never compare myself to the scholars I'm about to share with you all. I can only hope to make a fraction of the impact that they have made on society. And what I love about the lyric is that it reminds me that there are people in every field, industry, and community that have paved the ground and left their mark for future generations to use as guidance, inspiration, and motivation. Athletes have their greats that they study, artists, healthcare professionals, architects, scientists, hairstylists, designers, rappers, educators, and the list goes on. And when Cole says, I studied the greats, he's referring to Tupac, Nas, Biggie, Jay-Z, Eminem, and Andre 3000. When I say I study the greats, I am talking about Maya Angelou, Paulo Freire, Gloria Ladson-Billings, and Isabel Wilkerson. I am a devoted, dedicated, eager, and voracious student of these intellectual greats. I have an appetite for all of the work they prepared for us. And in my first video, I told y'all that I love learning, reading, writing, and studying. And a lot of that is centered around the scholarship of these four intellectuals. And so today, I am going to share a little about each of them and why I value their work. I'm doing this because I think it is important to acknowledge the voices and the influence in the space. And as I stated, much of what I share on this channel will be grounded in theories, frameworks, and ideas crafted and developed by these individuals. And I am going to start with none other than Miss Pretty Women Wonder, Where My Secret Lies, Dr. Maya Angelou, the phenomenal woman herself. What I love about Maya Angelou is she exuded love. Love for herself, love for her community, and love for humankind. She once said that love liberates. Take a listen.
So, I am grateful to have been loved and to be loved now and to be able to love, because that liberates. Love liberates. It doesn't just hold. That's ego. Love liberates.
How can you deny her grace, beauty, confidence, intelligence, and wisdom? One of the first times I deeply connected with Miss Angelou and her work was when I recited Phenomenal Woman as a pageant contestant during my 9th grade year. I remember it like it was yesterday, y'all. I sashayed back and forth across that long school auditorium stage in my purple spaghetti-strapped sheer dress, swaying my hips from side to side, one foot in front of the other. I say it's the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I am a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Y'all know the poem? And so that was my first deep introduction to what she represented. And over the years, my admiration and reverence for her continued to grow. In 2007, I was a part of an organization in college that brought her to campus. In 2012, I attended an event here in Memphis where she was the guest speaker. I have her books around the house. I watch many of her talks and interviews. I follow her Twitter page. Y'all, I indulge. I recently reread her book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Y'all, she was such a dynamic woman. She was a dancer, a writer, a viator, traveling all over the world. She was a polyglot, meaning she spoke several languages. She was an activist and an educator. I mean, she had undeniable proof that she was a phenomenal woman. My favorite quote comes from Maya, and she says, "When you get, you give. When you learn, you teach. And that will carry you all over the world." Number 2, Paulo Freire. I was introduced to Paulo Freire in 2013. At the time, I was enrolled in an urban education certification program, and his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, was the first book we were assigned to read by our professor, Dr. Beverly Cross, who is the paragon for a phenomenal woman. Dr. Cross, if you're watching this, thank you. Paulo Freire was a brilliant educator and social justice warrior. Being introduced to his book changed my life, and many of my thoughts and ideas about education, freedom, and liberation can be supported by the concepts in this book. My biggest takeaway, which inspired the title of my YouTube channel, is the road to freedom must involve knowledge, action, and reflection. Take a moment to listen to what Freire says about teachers and students.
The more I think of what I did, what I proposed, the more I understand myself, much more as a thinker and a kind of epistemologist, proposing a critical way of thinking and a critical way of teaching, of knowing to the teachers in order for them to work differently with the students.
Freire had a clear vision for what teaching and learning should look like in the classroom. He describes it in detail in chapter 2 of The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and much of what he believes about teaching and learning shows up in the work of the next great scholar that I am going to share with y'all, and that is Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings. She is the author, the creator, the queen of culturally relevant pedagogy. The same professor that introduced me to Paulo Freire introduced me to the work of Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings. And the most influential piece of work is her book, Dream Keepers. This book gave me the language that I needed to describe transformative, empowering, and revolutionary teaching. This book painted a picture of what great teaching looks like for marginalized communities, especially Black children. And according to Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, teachers must have 3 components to be classified as culturally relevant. Let's listen to her explain what she means by culturally relevant pedagogy.
I began studying in 1989 a group of 8 amazing teachers who, despite the odds, despite the resources, were able to produce some amazing, astounding results among African American students. I began calling this work culturally relevant pedagogy. And what I was able to distill from working with these teachers is that they have a laser-like focus on 3 things: student learning, or what we now think of as academic achievement, but not just test scores, but a full range of what young people learn. The second thing they focus on is what I would call cultural competence, not learning do's and don'ts about a specific culture, but fully embracing their own culture while acquiring fluency and facility in at least one other culture. And then the third thing that I saw among these teachers is what I sometimes call the so what factor. That is critical consciousness. We teach kids lots of things, but often students will say, why do I have to learn this? What is this important for? And this critical consciousness is designed to help students say, oh, well, now that I can read this, then I can read the newspaper article about this. Or now that I can compute this, I now understand why it is that we're spending this kind of money on these kinds of resources in our community. So those three things, academic achievement or student learning, cultural competence, and critical consciousness, really form the basis of this notion of culturally relevant pedagogy.
I believe that culturally relevant pedagogy needs to be at the center of every teacher education program, which is why many of my ideas about teaching and learning will be grounded in this theory. All right, y'all, we have made it to our last scholar, but certainly not least. Miss Isabel Wilkerson is the author of one of the most important books of all time. And I know I have said that about every scholar so far, but it's true. Her book, Caste, is phenomenal. It perfectly describes how society is structured and how there are made up rules and rankings that determine who has and who doesn't have access and opportunity to basic human rights. Take a listen to what she says about caste and race in the United States.
They were building a new country and they needed labor in order to do that. And they first, as we know, we have to first acknowledge, so it started with a massive theft of land, sought to enslave the indigenous people here, the native people here, and then imported people from another continent in massive numbers to build this new country out of wilderness. And in so doing, they began to create what we now know as race. Race is not an ancient concept in the way that caste is. Race is a relatively new concept that was used to take physical characteristics and to assign a value to those characteristics, and then use those characteristics to assign people a ranking in a society that was just emerging, that would ultimately become the United States. They were making adjustments as they went along. It didn't start out immediately. It was something that evolved over time. And whenever they had to make a decision about what was going to happen, who was going to be able to do what, who would have rights or no rights, not even over their own bodies, they used delineating human beings on the basis of what they look like into what we now know or call race. And in doing so, they use that as a metric in the same ways that other hierarchical systems could use different metrics. They could use metrics of religion. They could use a metric of language. They could use any metric that they chose to. And in this case, the colonists, the early colonists, chose to use what people look like to determine what their ranking would be in this country, and accorded rights and privileges on the basis of that.
Something she recently said is, ignorance is no protection against the consequences of an action. Not knowing is not protecting us. Y'all, we cannot use the excuse of I didn't know or I don't know. There is too much information out here for us to not know and understand our historical and current reality. And so this channel attempts to decrease our ignorance and help us learn and discover what we do know and what we don't know. All right, so I've just shared the greats that I currently study the most: Maya Angelou, Paulo Freire, Gloria Ladson-Billings, and Isabel Wilkerson. But as I stated in the beginning of the video, or did I state it? Well, I have a bonus. I have 3 honorable mentions I want to quickly share. Honorable mention number 1, Peter McLaren. I love his work on critical education. The book I reference often is Life in Schools, which describes how systemic oppression impacts schools and the need for critical education. Honorable mention number 2, Zaretta Hammond, a scholar of culturally responsive teaching. Her work deepens our understanding of culture and the role it plays in educating historically marginalized students. I am always referencing her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. Honorable mention number 3, Dr. Sean Ginwright, author, professor, and activist. I was recently introduced to his book, maybe within the last year, so not too recent, but I was introduced to his book or his work by a colleague. She sent me a podcast interview he did, which prompted me to buy his latest book, The 4 Pivots, which discusses some pivots, some shifts that we need to make as we continue to struggle and fight for liberation. Y'all, I love this book, and when you hear me say shifting from problem to possibility, I got it from him. Okay? That is all I have for now, y'all. As you take a few minutes to reflect on today's conversation, who are the greats that you are studying? Who influences your beliefs, values, and ways of thinking? What have you learned from them? How do you apply what you have learned from them? I look forward to reading the comments and learning about who paved the way for you, whose cadence you copied, whose style you mirrored, all of it. Thank y'all so much for being here. The links to all the videos that I shared will be in the description box. Again, thank you for being here. I love y'all. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye.